Welcome to the Exploress, time traveling through women's history, one era at a time. I'm Kate Armstrong. What does it mean to be an empress? The word comes from Old French, but its roots stretch back to the Latin imperium. It means a command. It means authority. It means power over a realm. But what does it really mean to be a woman with power over so many? What does it look like when an empire allows a woman to rule? In this series, we will travel with 3 different empresses, exploring their reigns, their worlds, and what it might have been like to be them. It's 1577, and on a side of the road outside Kandahar, in present-day Afghanistan, a woman is about to give birth. Midwives and female servants hover around her, securing the tent they've erected for privacy. No men will be allowed inside. After all, childbirth is women's business. The woman is squatting, facing in the direction of Mecca, with a large copper plate slid beneath her. Dirt sits on top to ensure that the earth will be the first thing the baby touches. When she emerges, the midwife ties the umbilical cord with a thread and cuts it, then gives the baby a ritual bath. She then wraps her in a white cloth, a newborn tradition in Islam. She is named Mir-un-Nisa, or Son of Women. What no one in this tent can know is that she will grow up to be the Empress of India. Let's travel back to Mughal India to learn about the adventurous and powerful Nur Jahan. We're lucky to have a Mughal expert with us for this journey, Ruby Lal, the author of the book Empress, The Astonishing Reign of Nur Jahan. So, grab your musket and your finest silks and jewels. Let's go traveling. But first, a quick shout out to some of my patrons. My newest lady president, Emily. My warrior queens, Alexis, Amanda, Kate, Ika, Amy, Jessie, June, Neve and Sloan, MCF and Sarah. My imperial empresses, Faye and Whimsy Soapworks, Alyssa, Letitia, Sally, Samara and Teresa. And my lady pharaohs, Bridget, Cheryl, Kat, Kate, Kimberly, Laura, Lori, Sophie, and the delightful Courtneys. Patrons play a huge part in keeping this show going. In return, they get all episodes early and ad-free, exclusive bonus episodes, including one I'll be dropping shortly all about harems, full interviews with our guests, including Ruby Lal. We talked about so much stuff in our interview, including another Mughal princess, which I couldn't fit into this episode, so well worth a listen. Plus discounts on merch, sneak peeks, and a lot more. To find out all about it, just go to the show notes. Let's start by placing ourselves in history, shall we? It's 1577. King James I is on the throne of Scotland, while his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, has just passed her 10th year of imprisonment. Her cousin, Elizabeth I, is still crushing it over in England. Pirate Queen Grania O'Malley is harassing English ships off Ireland's coast, but she'll soon be arrested and held in Dublin Castle for almost 2 years. In France, Catherine de' Medici is an influential queen mother. This year, the Great Comet will pass by Earth, getting many scientists quite hot and bothered. The Ottoman Empire and Spain are both dominant world powers, and colonization is really heating up. And Francis Drake is setting off on his big circumnavigation of the globe. But in India, we're all about the Mughal Empire. It makes up present-day northern and central India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and parts of Afghanistan, and is known for being wealthy, tolerant, and relatively progressive. Mughal India is a place where Sufis, Hindus, and Muslims coexist peacefully, where diversity is encouraged, and where the fertile land supports nearly 100 million people. When Nur is born, it's ruled by Akbar the Great, the third Mughal emperor, and a dynasty that will last for more than 300 years. To be clear, Nur's mother doesn't make a habit of delivering her babies on the sides of roads. Asmat already has 3 children when she's pregnant with Nur. Her family is traveling from Persia to India in a caravan when she goes into labor. This is, during this period, a pretty standard way of getting around. Here's Ruby.
People traveled in caravans in those days. So these were, long processions. And the elite had particular forms of traveling. That is, they traveled, along with merchants. So merchants, there would be different sections in which the elite would travel, and then there would be other sections in which ordinary people or merchants and so on would travel. So they join one of these caravans.
When Asmat gives birth to Nur, it's not her first time doing it. But to be on the road, in a moment of such transition, would make this particular birth especially fraught.
Typically, men could not participate in the actual moment of the arrival of the baby. So Asmat would be secluded. A wet nurse, the legendary Dai Dilaram, who becomes later on a very major and key officer and spends much of her life with Nur Jahan, supposedly traveled with them. And so she would create this kind of sacred space. Asmat, who had already been a mother, would be experienced. And yet this kind of rough moment of being on the road, a refugee, uncertain of what, there was a Persian saying that says that the moment a woman is pregnant, one of her foot is in life and the other in death.
This journey isn't an easy one for the family, but it's one they feel they have to make. Asmat and her husband, Giyas, are an educated, liberal, aristocratic couple who've decided to move their young family to Mughal India in search of a better life. Once the family settled, Giyas, a master of calligraphy, is lucky enough to get a job in the court of Akbar the Great. He rises swiftly through the ranks, eventually moving the family to Agra, the capital city. Most aristocratic gals would be memorizing scripture from the Quran and learning to comport themselves in high society. Boys in Mughal India have tutors, but most girls don't. There's a popular book from this period that advises parents.
In the case of daughters, they should be brought up to keep close to the house and live in seclusion, cultivating gravity, continence, modesty, and other qualities we have enumerated in the chapter on wives. They should be prevented from learning to read or write, but allowed to acquire such accomplishments as are commendable in women.
Yeah, okay. Another book, the Kabusnama, has a lot to say about a woman's place. Written by a guy called Keith, a prince who sets out to write a manual of sorts for his son, so he will know how to rule, suggests.
If you have a daughter, entrust her to kindly nurses and give her good nature. When she grows up, entrust her to a preceptor to learn the sacred law and the essential religious duties. But do not teach her to read and write. This is a great calamity. Once she is grown up, do your utmost to give her in marriage. It were best for the girl not to come into existence, but, being born, she had better be married or be buried.
Bold statement, sir.
Daughters are captive of their parents, helpless and incapable of finding employment. Make provision for her. Fasten her about someone's neck so as to escape from anxiety for her.
In case it isn't abundantly clear, Mughal India is a patriarchal place. Luckily, Nur has pretty girl-positive parents. She grows up studying the Quran, of course, but her father makes sure she can also read poetry, write in calligraphy, play instruments, and do math. As a result, she's more educated than most of her peers. Now, let's pause to speak to women's lives more generally in Mughal India. Lower-class ladies' lives depend a lot on their religion, their family's social standing, and financial situation. Their main jobs tend to be managing their households, involving tasks like carrying water, collecting fuel, cooking food, serving meals, tending cattle and spinning cloth, and, of course, raising the kids. Most wealthy women have enslaved ladies to do their menial tasks for them. A lot of us also have to work to bring in some extra cash. We might be employed as wet nurses, domestic servants, midwives, farmers, merchants, or artisans. Royal and upper-class women like Nur have the most freedom and educational opportunity. They might even have private tutors. There are no girls' schools, so most lower-class women receive lessons at home, which revolve around domestic duties and religion. Islamic ladies have greater freedoms than Hindu women in terms of education. Spiritual lessons are offered for girls at some mosques, as well as divorce and property rights. Islam teaches that men and women are equal, while Hinduism teaches, well, not quite that. Nur spends her days in the women's areas of her house. Most noble households have men's areas, in which women and female servants are not allowed, and vice versa, along with communal rooms. Women's lives are governed by a practice called purdah, an act of seclusion that sees us ladies closed off by veils and walls. Veiling is common amongst both Hindus and Muslims, though Nur is an exception in that she doesn't veil. Purdah tends to limit women's movement and their ability to participate in public life. After studying, Nur might accompany her mother and siblings to the bazaar or gardens, always with a male servant or a family member in tow. When she wants to visit friends, she'll travel via rooftop, along protected passageways that allow ladies to travel from house to house without the need for a male chaperone. At the age of 17, Nur marries a guy named Ali Kuli Beg, a government official and former soldier. This is not a love match. Few marriages are, at least in elite circles. In Mughal India, marriages are arranged by the female members of the bride and groom's families. The formal marriage offer, or hastgari, involves offering two sums of money to the bride's parents. First, insurance money for the daughter in case of divorce or the husband's death. And second, something called the price of milk, money given to the bride's mother in symbolic repayment for the milk she fed her daughter. You know what? I like it. Once the payment is negotiated and the offer accepted, the groom's female relatives bring a shawl and a ring to the bride's house to mark the betrothal. The bride and groom won't meet until the day of their wedding. The night before, they each attend their own henna parties. Nur's hands and feet are decorated with henna by her female relatives. And hopefully, they give her some marital advice while they're doing it. Marriage is probably the most important event for women in Mughal India. It's almost always arranged to establish financial and political alliances between families. Child marriages and polygamy are both incredibly common. Sorry. And women's rights within marriage, including inheritance and the right to divorce, largely depend on whether or not their families practice Islam or Hinduism. Divorce and remarriage are allowed amongst Muslim women, but not amongst Hindus, at least for the ladies. Islamic women technically have inheritance rights, although, let's be honest, many men ignore them. But Hindu women don't. It's also worth noting that the Hindu practice of sati, or self-immolation, is still prevalent under the Mughals. After the death of your husband, a widowed Hindu woman is expected to burn herself alive alongside her husband on his funeral pyre. If she declines, sometimes her family will burn her anyway. Muslim Mughal rulers do try to ban this practice, but it will continue in some circles for quite a long time. On her wedding day, Nur probably wears a knee-length shirt and shalwar, or long pants, of white muslin or silk, with gold decorations worked in for luck. She'll also wear a veil of transparent silk and kohl around her eyes. During the ceremony, a wooden screen will separate the men from the women. Nur and Ali say their vows without being able to see each other. Once they finish the ceremony, the screen is taken away, and the couple stare at each other in what is called the Mirror of Happiness. At least, we hope it is. This is when Nur is formally introduced to the man who is now her husband. Hey there, stranger. Ali will then give her a jewel, as is custom. The next phase of Nur's life can now officially begin. The newlyweds move to Burdwan, a military outpost in Bengal, for Ali's job. In 1600, Nur gives birth to a daughter, Ladli, or the loved one. Not according to that guy Keith, she's not. Let's skip ahead a little, shall we? We're going forward 12 years to be exact. During these years, Nur has been pretty busy. She spent her time raising their daughter, managing a large estate while her husband is away for work, and honing her hunting skills. Hunting is a big deal amongst royal men of this era, a sport taken up to rid the land of pesky predators, but also for sport. It's not a thing that women tend to do. Some will go on hunts just for fun, but they rarely do the actual shooting. But Nur is going to become famous for her hunting prowess, just one of many things that will someday make her an exceptional and trailblazing empress. But her world is about to be turned upside down by a rebellion against Emperor Jahangir, who took over once his father Akbar died. It turns out that Nur's eldest brother and her husband were both part of the conspiracy to assassinate the emperor, and when it fails, it's gonna be off with both their heads. Nur's father is placed on house arrest on the off chance he was also involved. What is Dad to do with his recently widowed daughter? Well, he's gonna send her to the imperial harem. Wait, what?
Her father is by this time, his title is the pillar of the state. He's the prime minister of Jahangir. So her brothers are highly positioned. And because her husband was an employee, it was the rule that she would come to live in the harem, or would be under the protection of the monarch.
When a Mughal officer is killed, his wife isn't left alone to do what she pleases. Instead, the emperor has the right to take charge of his surviving wife and children. Nur, who is by now a mature and lovely 31-year-old lady who has been living very independently in what is essentially the Wild West of Mughal India, is invited to join the emperor's harem. Can we call it an invitation? Let's go ahead and change that to an order. So, what is the harem exactly? We already know that Mughal India is a pretty patriarchal situation. Men go out and do the business, and the ladies stay secluded at home. Women have always had separate women's quarters in the imperial palace, but Akbar the Great took things just a step further. He ordered that all women of the royal household be confined behind the high walls of a harem. As in, he literally built a giant walled-in area, ushered the royal women inside, gave them each their own nice apartment, and closed them off from the outside world.
It's called in Persian Shabistan-e-Iqbal, literally the fortunate place of sleep. And they're architecturally glorious. It's red sandstone. All sorts of patterns are taken into it. But it's really the first time in the career of this dynasty that you have the walled stone harem.
Between 300 and 5,000 women lived in the harem, which was under constant surveillance. There were rules about where women could go and who could visit them. Female guards and eunuchs watched over each area inside the harem, and warriors patrolled the perimeter. So why did Akbar the Great, or let's be honest, not so great, decide to permanently seclude his ladies? The usual patriarchal nonsense. Akbar was obsessed with rebranding himself as a sacred, divine, and godlike being. By extension, his women must be seen as untouchable goddesses of unquestionable purity, accessible to him alone. We tend to have a certain vision of the harem, and based on what I've just told you, you might be feeling sorry for Nur. But hold up now. When Nur and her daughter roll up to the harem, Akbar's son, Jahangir, is ruling. And the harem isn't the cloistered little beehive it started out as. It has become a multi-story palace with high domes and turrets, split-level apartments, intricately carved reliefs and artworks, interconnected courtyards, curved balconies, running water, and beautiful gardens, separated from the rest of the Mughal court complex by thick walls. And look, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
You have, of course, it's a space of learning, as you said, learning, viewing paintings, especially the first atelier, painting atelier that comes to be established under Akbar. Haram is the house of the most prized manuscripts, poetry, storytelling, all of these kinds of things.
This is where Nur will live with the emperor's grandmother, mother, stepmothers, wives, and concubines, as well as all their children, both male and female, wet nurses, foster mothers, midwives, unmarried aunts, elderly female relatives, widowed wives of important court members, and other ladies also populate the harem, all served by a veritable army of female staff, including, excitingly, some female warriors called Urdu Begis. A Mughal creation, these are bodyguards who don't practice purdah, and they're trained in weapons like the bow and arrow, spear, dagger, and sword. Think twice, pervy intruders and peeping toms. These ladies come to slay. Historically, the harem is a fascinating and pretty complicated female space. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole about harems, and I'll be sharing a video bonus episode over on Patreon all about my findings shortly, so make sure you head over there if you want more info. For now, though, with this harem, it's important to realize this is not the brothel-like, sexed-up Western image that we often get, where everyone is hanging around and waiting for the emperor to serve his carnal pleasure. The harem is a small city where women can read in their own vast library, study music with private tutors, write poetry, raise their children in peace, arrange marriages, and, of course, meet with one another to discuss court life, hatch political schemes, and even offer diplomatic advice to the emperor and senior court officials. Turns out, these women can wield a lot of influence from behind their very high walls. Several elderly women, including the emperor's mother, take Nur under their wing in the harem, and she quickly finds her feet. She's already well regarded, thanks to her father's high status as an administrator in the Mughal court, and in just a few years, someone pretty important is gonna take some serious notice. It's time to meet Nur's future husband, Nur ad-Din Jahangir, or Light of Faith, Conqueror of the World in Persian. This is Akbar's eldest son, handpicked as his successor, and groomed from birth to take charge. He inherits a well-established government, a fine military, excellent legal and administrative systems, and a royal treasury worth about 150 million rupees. Definitely a silver spoon situation. But Jahangir is a very committed and competent ruler as well, and a bit of what we might call a Renaissance man. He's passionate about hunting, nature, and painting, loves philosophy, mysticism, and astrology, and hates staying in one place. He prefers to be out on the road, which is something we'll talk about more later. When Nur arrives at the harem, Jahangir is already well into his reign. He's 36, the father of 3 strapping sons, and the husband of, it's rumored, 1,000 women. It's actually 19, which is still an inconceivable number. We know the number because Jahangir keeps a list of his wives after he meets Nur. Look, if you had as many wives as he does, you'd need a list of them too. 18 other wives notwithstanding, Nur and Jahangir's meet-cute is the stuff of legend in India. The story goes that Jahangir is strolling the bazaar one day, holding 2 prized pigeons in his hands. He sees some pretty flowers he wants to purchase, so he asks a gorgeous woman standing nearby if she will hold his pigeons for him, as one does. When he returns, he sees she has only one of his birds. When he asks, rightly, "Where's my pigeon?" she simply says, "It flew away." When he asks her how that happened, she releases the remaining pigeon and says, cheekily, "Like that." After that, Jahangir is a goner. He falls swiftly in love with her beauty and her wit, and begins spending more time with her in the harem. The contemporary court historian, Farid Bakari, wrote that Jahangir was infatuated with the strength of her personality and admired her kindness and generosity. Amongst the many things Nur has been doing in her free time, she helps to organize weddings and has provided dowries for hundreds of poor orphan girls. She even designs an inexpensive style of wedding dress for them, called the Nur Mahali.
She builds great care for people around her in the harem. While she was in the harem, for example, She arranges, or she gives the option to several hundred women in the harem, saying, if you need to get married, you should go and get married. If you cannot find husbands for yourself, we can help you do that. She arranges to give dowry to over 500 orphans. She's an aesthete. She designs gorgeous wedding dresses for very inexpensive price, and those patterns are still sold outside the Agra fort in the old bazaar in Agra. It's called Noor Mahali.
And so, in 1611, at the age of 34, Nur gets married for the second time. This is when she receives her first official royal name, Nur Mahal, or Light of the Palace. She lights up Jahangir's life, that's for sure. The thing about Jahangir is that he loves to travel. In their first 2 years of marriage, he and Nur returned to the capital and palace only once, and after that, they never stopped traveling.
As soon as he ascends the throne in 1605, he starts roaming his empire. He's one of the most itinerant Mughals. Mughals always remain itinerant, but they moved later on either for war or for pleasure or expeditions and so on and so forth. But Nur began to accompany Jahangir literally from 1613, and they never, 2 years into their marriage, and they never stopped moving. Everything that happened because of this. And I believe her being outdoors, her being in the raw country, was a very key aspect of her rise.
Their court lives an itinerant life on the road, pitching tents in a massive royal camp that moves throughout India every few weeks. Jahangir enjoys traveling for the sake of adventure, but he also knows that it's an excellent way for his people to see his imperial grandeur and power. As you'll remember from our Tudor series, this is something that English kings and queens did as well, going out on progress so they could remind their people that they existed and that they had some serious power. The royal camp, or lashkar, dubbed the Camp of Good Fortune, is a portable city that takes up 3 miles of land, with hundreds of tents and some 300,000 people. The royals, administrators, courtiers, soldiers, and servants of the imperial Mughal court. Quite a sight to behold. The harem has its own tents as well, distinguished by the high red screens surrounding them. As Jahangir's favorite wife, Nur has her own tents and travels with him constantly, enjoying the mobility and relative freedoms of life out on the road. But with so many wives on the go, what is it that makes Nur so special? There are many things Jahangir loves about her, but he is especially enamored of her hunting skills. Hunting is incredibly important for the Mughals. It symbolizes imperial dominance and gives an emperor a chance to assert his bravery and skill in public. A Mughal hunting party is also an opportunity for locals to meet their emperor, to pay their respects, and to make complaints. Jahangir grew up learning how to hunt, as it was considered an essential part of a future ruler's repertoire. And as we already know, Nur is a fantastic shot. She spent years hunting in the Bengali wilderness, and nothing delights Jahangir more than hunting with his wife. In fact, he proudly records her kills in his memoirs right alongside his. Here's an example of her prowess in action. In 1619, Nur rides out on an elephant to do some hunting. When the dogs and scouts spot 4 prowling tigers, she fires 6 shots and bags them all. In case you weren't aware, it's exceedingly difficult to kill a tiger, especially with a 17th century musket. Jahangir is so impressed that he starts throwing coins at his wife in celebration. A poet traveling with the hunting party writes,
Though Nur Jahan be in form of woman, in the ranks of men, she's a tiger slayer.
2 years later, the royal couple are approached by some citizens whose village is being terrorized by a tiger, and Jahangir declines to kill it. He's just promised Allah not to kill any more living things. Instead, he sends his wife, who coolly mounts her elephant and dispatches that tiger in just 1 single shot. Nur has such a reputation for hunting that, when the court painter goes to capture her on canvas, he has her pose in hunting attire. In the painting, she wears a knee-length tunic with a sash, tight trousers, a regal turban favored by men, and ruby and diamond earrings. She stands confidently, loading a musket. Most court portraits feature women sitting in a group of other ladies or with her husband. Portraying a woman by herself, in a stance that shows she's skilled with a musket, is unheard of in Mughal artwork. And it really says a lot about Nur. In 1616, Jahangir changes his wife's official royal name from Light of the Palace to Nur Jahan Begum, or Light of the World. Jahangir is down bad for his badass wife. And we see it in how much power he gives her. Nur and Jahangir are co-sovereigns in the truest sense. They rule together, travel together, and hunt together. Nur has her own wealth, her own estates, and she issues her own orders. Women have wielded power in the Mughal court from behind the scenes before, but she wields hers in a more direct and visible way. For example, Mughal emperors often sit in the Jaroka, a balcony of the palace. This is a place where government business is conducted and courtiers present themselves, so the people have a chance to see their monarch in action.
One of the important informal signs of sovereignty was appearing in the balconies of whatever the imperial lodgings were. And this was started by Akbar, her father-in-law. And the idea was taken from the Hindu temples, that the emperor and the empress, that Nur, when she arrived in the balconies, people from below actually viewed her like a goddess.
It's a public stage of sorts, and Nur will be the only Mughal empress to sit in it. She's also heavily involved in important royal rituals and public ceremonies, and Jahangir often lets her plan royal events and distribute gifts. In 1621, he writes in his diary,
Nur Jahan Begum has made suitable arrangements for every solar and lunar weighing ceremony since she entered into marriage with me, and she has considered it a pleasure to do so.
Gift-giving is an important way in which the Mughals cement political alliance, and it's something Nur becomes famous for. When Shah Jahan, one of Jahangir's sons, reports back to the emperor after a battle, Nur gives him a robe of honor, bejeweled turbans and weapons, 2 horses and a royal elephant, and gives his wives and children clothing, and presents his officers with the same. Nur also makes important alliances, cementing her family's influence at court. She doles out positions of power to her relations. As soon as she's crowned empress, her father becomes the wazir, or finance minister. A few years after that, she secures a government post for her youngest brother, makes her other brother a steward of the royal household and treasuries, and marries her daughter and her niece off to 2 royal princes. Nur is in a position of power, and she's not afraid to use it for the people she loves. An important sign of one's imperial power is undertaking architectural and construction projects, which Nur also has a gift for. The first public building she designs is a traveler's inn on the Grand Trunk Road between Agra and Lahore. This is no humble roadside stopover. It has its own mosque and can hold up to 2,000 guests.
And its aesthetics are gorgeous. I mean, there are, on the outside, there are vine pitchers, there are floral inscriptions, lilies, very Persian in character, reminiscent of life.
To ensure that everyone knows it's the work of the Empress, she has the gateway of the inn inscribed with the phrase, "Erected by Nur Jahan Begum." Credit where credit's due. A few years later, she oversees the creation of the Light Scattering Garden in Agra, as well as the Light Enhancing Garden in Hari Parbat Palace, each of which features descending terraces, walkways, pavilions, pools, waterfalls, you name it. When her parents pass, she spends 6 years designing their tomb along the river Jamuna, complete with a memorial garden of its own.
The tomb of her parents on the banks of the river Yamuna, which is called a jewel box. It's fully marble, and it has all sorts of gorgeous stones etched into it, patterns etched into it. And the rickshawalas today call it the baby Taj, but actually the Taj takes its inspiration from this mausoleum.
Like ancient Egypt's Hatshepsut did many centuries before her, Nur's ambitious public projects make sure that her name and her role as empress is visible for all to see. But nothing says, "I'm kind of a big deal" in the eyes of the people more than putting your face on some coins. One of the 3 signs of sovereignty in Islam is that coins must be minted in your name. In 1617, gold and silver coins began to circulate with Jahangir's name on the front and Nur's right there on the back. This is the first time a woman's name will ever appear on a Mughal coin. Get it, Nur? She also exercises her authority by simply wielding it. Her husband values her opinion, and she's heavily involved with Jahangir's politics, weighing in on military campaigns, trade deals, and foreign diplomacy. He allows her to rule on his behalf with a lot of independence. We have evidence that she makes imperial decisions about commerce and land rights, and that she intervenes on behalf of peasants on issues of overtaxation. Girl likes fashion, but it doesn't mean she doesn't also understand economics. We contain multitudes. To do all this, she issues her own imperial orders, another of the 3 signs of Islamic sovereignty. Her first royal order is issued in 1617, in which she threatens an officer if he doesn't pay his outstanding debts to the treasurer of an estate. The order has a wax seal with her signature that reads, "By the light of the sun of Jahangir, and the divine grace the signet of Nur Jahan has illumined the world like the moon." Mughal women have previously issued hukums, or orders without much power behind them, but they have always just reiterated the orders of the emperor and signed them as mother or daughter or sister of the emperor. But Nur issues orders in her own right, and she signs her own name as sovereign. The significance here cannot be underlined enough times. The only sign of Islamic sovereignty that eludes Nur is that her name is not mentioned during the khutbah, or the central sermon of Friday prayers. But this doesn't seem to matter that much. One contemporary historian writes,
Except for the fact that her name was not recited in the sermon. Whatever other requisite of kingship there are, were performed by her.
So we know that Nur is ambitious, that she is smart, and that she makes a great partner. But as time goes on, her relationship with her husband shifts. Instead of being co-rulers, most of the work starts falling squarely on Nur's very capable but slightly harassed shoulders. A big reason is because Jahangir's health is beginning to fail. Alcoholism and drug addiction are pretty par for the course in the Mughal court, but Jahangir's drinking problem is spiraling right out of control. It began when he was just 18, at which time he was drinking about 20 cups of spirits a day. One can only hope that a servant was slipping some water up in there. When spirits could no longer get the job done, he turned to sedatives and opiates, which exacerbated his chronic respiratory problems, probably asthma. His doctors and Nur all tried to get him to drink less, with limited success. By 1621, he's fallen seriously ill, and the writing is officially on the wall. In his own diary, he writes,
I kept this secret from most of those familiar with and near to me, and did not inform the physicians and hakims. I only imparted this to Nur Jahan Begum then, whom I did not think anyone was fonder of me.
So Nur has to not only keep her husband's secret, but also keep the empire running. No pressure. Unfortunately for Nur, an annoying man is about to get in her hair. Jahangir's eldest son, Shah Jahan, chooses this moment to gather an army and stir the pot a little. His rebellion isn't as scandalous as it may sound. It's pretty common for Mughal sons to rise up against their fathers, and Shah Jahan is no different. In fact, he gathered a number of nobles, raised an army, and seized the treasury just 3 years before. There'd already been a lot of manly scepter swinging here. Battles, retreats, lists of unreasonable demands. Shah Jahan even publicly accuses Nur of being power-hungry and condemned his father for allowing a woman to rule. Not cute, sir. But the royal forces prevailed, and Shah Jahan slunk away to lick his wounds. In 1626, however, a governor named Mahabat, who previously led the royal forces, decides that Nur and her family have accrued way too much power. He turns against the emperor and empress. He stops paying his region's taxes and marries his daughter without asking for Jahangir's blessing, which leads our reigning emperor to imprison the girl and her new husband. Seems kinda harsh, but okay. Humiliated, Mahabhat decides to gather the support of the Rajputs, a warrior class, and marches to the emperor's camp. He is told he can't enter until he pays the money he owes. Of course, he ignores this, storming in with his merry band of warriors and kidnapping the emperor's retinue. He makes Jahangir get on an elephant, hoping it'll make it look like he's being escorted by the warriors instead of kidnapped, and takes him and his people to the other side of the river. He goes ahead and burns the bridge behind him. It's time to dust off his hands. We're all done here. Obviously, this guy doesn't know a lot about the enterprising Nur. Before long, two veiled women emerge from the harem and make their way across the new makeshift bridge that's been erected. Nobody questions them because, come on, they're just women. Obviously, no kind of threat. The ladies, turns out, are Nur and her trusty eunuch, who head straight to her brother's tent and summon a war council. Nur yells at these men for allowing her husband to be taken so easily. You have been disgraced before God and the people by your own actions. The best tactical plan is to array our forces tomorrow, cross the river, overthrow the miscreants, and do ourselves the honor of kissing the ground as slaves of His Majesty. Nur does not pull her punches. But look, they all agree that she's right. By now, Mahabhat has realized that Nur escaped, and that he made a grave error in not placing a guard around her. He forces Jahangir to send Nur two messages. The first says, "Come back, girl, or else." And the second tells her not to fight Mahabhat. Yeah, okay, big boy. She swats both of these threats away as one does a pesky fly. Next, she hops on her war elephant, armed with a musket, and leads a daring rescue attempt across the river. Unfortunately, despite this excellent visual, the rescue fails. The portion of the river they choose to cross is too treacherous, and although some people make it across, many drown. Nur manages to make it across and advances, so deep up in her feelings about this whole situation, she doesn't realize her forces are no longer with her. Surrounded by Mahabhat's men, she has no choice but to surrender and join her husband in captivity once more. Nur and Jahangir spend the next 100 days in a weird sort of captivity. Most people don't even realize they've been kidnapped, as Mahabhat makes them hold court as per usual. But he is in charge behind the scenes, with Jahangir essentially acting as puppet. Another blow, he also finds and imprisons Nur's brother. Nur knows no one is coming to save them, so she's gonna have to do the job herself. As part of her normal duties as empress, she's allowed to meet regularly with nobles and courtiers. It's during these meetings that she secretly develops plans, spending 300,000 rupees of her own money to buy loyalty and an army unnoticed, all while her husband is off pretending to play nice with Mahabhat. Finally, their enemy's soldiers leave camp to hunt, which is when Nur tells her archers it's time to go. They go after them, killing 900 of Mahabhat's soldiers, and properly scaring the pants off the rest. Jahangir warns Mahabhat that his wife is going to attack him too, which gains the man's trust, as if the emperor would do his wife dirty like that. The gambit works, though. Mahabhat becomes less watchful of Jahangir. He also agrees to Jahangir's plan to move camp in advance of the slower royal retinue. Nur uses her newfound lack of supervision to meet up with her troops and take a shortcut. They march through the night, arriving ahead of Mahabhat, and cross the river successfully this time. When Mahabhat finally arrives, it's to find a giant imperial army waiting, led by the intrepid take-no-prisoners Nur. Mahabhat surrenders and is exiled. Jahangir is rescued, and the Mughal dynasty is restored, all thanks to a powerful woman.
And he takes captive the emperor, but forgets to take captive the empress who was right there. So she escapes and strategizes, leads a war, loses it, strategizes again, and saves the emperor.
And everyone's super pleased about her victory, right?
This was not palatable to people. That is, you're crossing the boundary when you get into active battle, right? And this is, in a way, the beginning of her decline.
Despite this absolute triumph, Nur's ending is not a particularly happy one. By late 1627, Jahangir is clearly dying. He passes away age 60 in October of that year. Nur dutifully summons the court and quickly finds herself sidelined by her brother, Asaf Khan. Lovely man. He steamrolls his sister, declares himself in charge, and throws his support behind Shah Jahan, Nur's notoriously horrible son-in-law. When Nur tries to protest, he refuses to speak with her, sends her and her supporters away, and essentially imprisons her. Extremely rude. But he has control of the army, which means he's now driving this particular war elephant, and the court all but deserts Nur Jahan. Let's pause for a second. Nur has spent years proving herself to be an excellent ruler. Why doesn't the court back her now? The short answer is because she's a lady. The slightly longer answer has to do with the Islamic concept called fitna.
In the documents of the time, a word fitna is used, which has very deep implications in Islamic history, which means originally used for Prophet Muhammad's favorite wife, Aisha.
She was the daughter of the first caliph, supported by Sunni Muslims, and she led her forces against the fourth caliph, supported by Shia Muslims, in the Battle of the Camel, the first example of Islamic fitna, meaning chaos or civil war. Shia Muslims cast Aisha as a treacherous, ambitious villain, while Sunni Muslims viewed her as a pious hero. When she was wounded in battle, the victorious Ali reprimanded her, saying,
Is that what the messenger of God ordered you to do? Didn't he order you to remain quietly in your house?
But subsequently in history, the name came to be attached to, it means civil strife, it means, women's sexual power is disruptive.
Their sexuality and ambition were obviously dangerous, and they were the source of all things trouble. Many people in the Mughal court already hated that Nur had so much power. They stayed quiet whilst Jahangir was alive, but Shah Jahan made no secret of his jealousy. When he comes to power, everyone is free to blame the mischief-making of Nur Jahan for the chaos of the past decade. Yep, let's all just blame it on the lady. And so, with Nur silenced and sidelined, Asaf executes all other potential contenders to the throne, and Shah Jahan is officially crowned emperor in February of 1628. Once he takes power, he does something that our Egyptian pharaoh friend Hatshepsut would be very familiar with. He embarks on a deliberate and systematic campaign of erasure, ensuring that all official histories and records omit Nur's achievements. We can't have people thinking she's the reason anything is good right now. In fact, the only time her name appears in the records is when she's blamed for the violence of Jahangir's last years in power. Shah Jahan's kind of a tool, yeah? And this is while Nur is still alive. Eventually, her brother releases her from captivity, and she seems to be free to live her life as she sees fit. Notably, she doesn't choose to spend the rest of her life in the harem, as many other elderly Mughal women do. Instead, she spends her days in her various private estates, living off the money from her lands, investments, and pension. Nur, turns out, was pretty good at retirement planning. She spends the next 10 years designing and constructing Jahangir's tomb, as well as her own mausoleum, gives money to the poor, and visits her husband's grave. We can also hope she enjoyed her freedom and took up some crafty hobbies. On November 18th, 1645, Nur Jahan passes away. She will be the only female ruler in the long history of India's Mughal dynasty. Her impact and legacy may have been erased, but it was never truly forgotten, thanks in large part to her many building projects. When Shah Jahan eventually builds the white marble Taj Mahal in Agra as a memorial to his wife, he is revered for it. But nobody misses how very similar it is to another building, the tomb that Nur designed for her parents decades previous. It's Nur's memorial, not Shah Jahan's, that is the first Mughal tomb to be built entirely of white marble and adorned with intricate inlays of precious stone. In fact, today, that tomb is called the Baby Taj. Shah Jahan tries his best to shove Nur into the shadows, but she was dubbed the light of the world for a reason. Her legacy would continue to shine on. Until next time. Thanks for listening. If you like The Exploress and you want to support the show, tell a friend about it. Leave a rating or a review wherever you listen. Become a patron, buy a book from the Exploress Bookshop at bookshop.org, or just shoot me an email. I always love hearing from you. Thanks to Ruby for joining us. You can also listen to my full interview with her over on Patreon. We actually talked about two princesses, Nur Jahan and Guldaban, whose story is amazing, so it's definitely worth checking out. This episode was written by Carly Quinn and edited and produced by me. Some of the music you just enjoyed comes courtesy of Keith Zizza, Rahul Popawala, Arnito, and Feslyan Studios. You'll find a full track list and links in the show notes. Thank you to Mr. Exploress for my logo and Joshua Stackhouse for my theme music. And thank you to the following for their vocal stylings: Syed Raza,